Cancel.
Squeezy.
It's time for me to do a new type of segment that I've been wanting to try. And I had this idea and I wanted to do it. So it's time for music history lessons where I go over the history of some sort of music. And maybe if this is good, we'll do bands and we'll do other genres. But today I wanted to discuss the history of emo music. Now, I'm an emo kid. I still consider myself an emo person. That is the vibe. That is the lifestyle that I like. The good parts of that. I try to. And that's the music I mainly listen to. If I open up Sirius XM, I always go to emo, the emo project 713 channel 713. FYI. And, what I usually listen to is a lot of 2000s, maybe some 90s, maybe some 2010s emo music. But today, a lot of people don't know the origins and that stuff of emo music. So I think it's time that we let's
just jump into it
and see what is the origins of emo music. So we start off, I believe it was the mid to late 1980s, and there was the DC hardcore scene, which if you ever talk to some asshole, and they're usually assholes, they start telling you like real emo music is DC's post-hardcore scene in the late 80s and stuff like that. And you think of bands Rite of Spring, you think of bands like Embrace, Fugazi, I would consider in that mindset. And that's kind of the origins of what emo music is. And it's emo music in most music genres down to its core is just a term to describe the music itself. So when you say this is emo music, what you mean is there's not necessarily a certain sound, but usually sounds come out of it. What most music genres usually start out as is like just the title. So emo, and we think about what's emo short for? Emotional. And so emotional music. And so what the best definition I would say of what emo music is emotionally driven rock music. And so that's my detail. And you think about other genres, like if you think about pop music, what is pop music? Pop is short for popular. And so we use that term for music that is popular and music you would hear. And that's why some people say top 40, because that's technically what you consider pop music. And the thing with pop music is it doesn't always start. So, pop punk, that started out from punk music, and then they wanted to be more accessible and get radio airplay and reach that top 40. And back in the day, it was TRL you wanted to get on. And that means that showed good success as a band, And so that's what pop music is, and that's why genres become like pop emo or pop punk or pop rock. It's more popular music, and so it's more accessible to everyone. And so when we think about emo music, I think you have to realize the origin is emo is short for emotional, and this is emotionally driven rock music. And it's usually in the lyrics itself, but it comes from post-hardcore origins and stuff like that. So, and maybe some punk too. So that's why I think I would include Fugazi, and probably why a lot of pop punk bands are going to be put under the label as emo. And necessarily just because a band released an emo album does not mean they are an emo band. Panic at the Disco, their first album, I would consider 100% an emo album. And then after that, I would say maybe Pretty Odd I would put in there, Vices and Virtues, and then, kind of going forward from there, they became very pop. Paramore is another example. Their first 3 albums, and I would say even the self-titled to an extent, are very emo albums. But then you go to After Laughter and that god-awful This Is Why. I would consider those more pop albums or 70s style rock type of mumbo-jumbo. And then that was like 80s synth pop sounding. And so, they're more pop bands now, and I don't think there's anything wrong with going from being an emo band to a pop band. It's just kind of how the label is, and just because you're once an emo band doesn't mean you are always an emo band. That is kind of, because if you're not really, the idea is emotionally driven rock music. That's how I consider it. So if you really think about the emo label itself, it's been redefined over the years, and really with emo music, there is a wide variety of different even musical styles you can go into, because like I said, it comes from post-hardcore. So you have that, and then you have a lot of pop punk bands that could be considered emo, because I consider Fall Out Boy emo up until the one with the bear on it, Folie à Deux. I consider, up to that, they were an emo band. After that, they did some pop rock anthems type stuff. And so when, Fall Out Boy wanted to start out, they just like, let's be pop punk band, because I think Pete Wentz was from that post-hardcore scene, and he was like, I want to make music that women actually want to listen to. And that's one of my best advice to give people. I should have put that on like a couple episodes ago and say my best music advice. I'm like, play music women listen to. It doesn't matter what genre, but play music women actually listen to. That's my advice if you actually want to try and make money in music. That's something I do. So many different types of rock styles or different styles of emo music really kind of flourished out of that, because the title of what is considered emo music is emotionally driven rock music. And when you think about how rock music came to be, and by the time it reached the 90s, they had that, post-hardcore, hardcore. They had a lot of punk bands were still active. That's when, grunge was really popular. And so that's another style of rock music. And then Green Day released Dookie, and then Weezer released an album. And people think Weezer's emo. I wouldn't consider them emo. They paved the way for a lot of emo bands, but I would consider them an alternative band for the most part. So let's go into different types of emo type of things. So you have the traditional first wave emo, which is like the purists would consider true emo, like the post-hardcore scene from DC, the DC post-hardcore scene, which everyone talks about, which if you're not into that shit, it's okay. And you can still be a true emo kid, and you don't have to listen to that shit. That first wave, Indian Summer, Moss Icon, Grey Matter, bands I would consider that, Fugazi, Rites of Spring was, they're kind of in the post-hardcore type of thing. And then you also have other different types of another type is kind of indie math rock, or nowadays we're calling it Midwest emo, because a lot of these guys are from the Midwest, and like is kind of a style that really, when you're living in the Midwest, it's a style of music that you really like. But like when you're living somewhere like you really love, like, it's not, it doesn't hit as hard as you want it to. Those bands include The Promise Ring, Mineral, American Football. American Football, I would consider I put them as like one of the forefronts of Midwest emo music, because if you like Midwest emo, you've listened to American Football. I definitely consider that. If I say like what bands, I want to get into Midwest emo, what should I get into? If you want to go from like kind of the beginning, the origins of it, American Football, 100%. Cap and Jazz, Sunny Day Real Estate, Texas is the Reason, Braid, Drive Like Jehu, all other bands. Current days, I think Hot Mulligan is probably one of the best emo math rock that could be considered indie math rock. Jeff Rosenstock's pretty good. Pup is good. I would consider them in that genre as well. That's more indie math rock, but it's also what math rock and like Midwest, Midwest emo is a better term, but what math rock really was, it was like emo jazz. That's how the best way I've heard it being described to me, emo jazz, because a lot of complicated guitar riffs and like, you use a lot of seventh chords. And that's, if you want to hear seventh chords or ninth chords or any, type of like jazzy type chords in rock music, Midwest emo or math rock as they call it too. I think those two terms can be interchangeable. I feel like math rock is a little more technical than Midwest emo needs to be. Midwest emo, I think Mom Jeans is up there too. They're a little whiny if you don't like them and stuff like that. So that's an example of indie math rock, Midwest emo, as we're now kind of how it's kind of evolved and becoming today. And then you have like the more faster, louder, and just like more aggressive music. And that's more, people call it Screamo, which is not a real music genre. You call it Screamo because the guy's screaming, and that does not define a genre, because that would be calling like, what kind of genre is it? Oh, it's like singing genre. Like that makes no sense. Screaming is another form of singing, so it's like a category of a way to sing, in my mind. But, everyone has a little different take. But that's why I don't think Screamo is a genre, or a subgenre of the emo movement. But it is, people call it that when they are uneducated. And so stop saying Screamo, okay? And so you get more aggressive type, bands that really come from the hardcore, metalcore type of scene. And these are, some more big bands. Zeta, Orchid, Circle Take the Square, Antioch Row, Page 99, City of Caterpillars, Majority Rule, Funeral Diner, those. This is the category I kind of put Under Oath in, and Under Oath is like one of my favorites. I consider them in that. Silverstein, I'd probably put them in more like that. This is more emo stuff that's considered emo music, and a lot of what kind of makes it different from like standard metal screaming versus like in this style of music is there is a lot of singing too. It's not all screaming, there's a lot of singing along with it. Some guys just straight up scream, like I say Hot Mulligan, not an example of this band. That singer's pretty much just kind of screaming, so scared that you don't want me here. He's kind of just screaming it, and it, he sounds awful, but it's like great. It's also kind of great too, because you kind of want, and something with emo is has a lot of roots in punk, and so punk is very DIY, and so yeah, that's how we get there. And then there's sassier, groups such as the Albatross, the Blood Brothers, See You Space Cowboy, The Plot to Blow You Up, the Eiffel Tower, and later Orchid too would be considered there as where. Then there's the bands that I think are my favorite style in the kind of emo genre is the more pop driven. A lot of these bands can also be considered pop punk, but you can be pop punk and emo. You don't necessarily have to be one or the other. A lot pop punk and emo music they're kind of peanut butter and jelly, where jelly and peanut butter are two different things, but they meld so well together that it makes a delicious, tasty treat. And so that's bands I usually like and stuff like that. So those are bands including Brand New, Thursday, Funeral for a Friend, Jimmy Eat World, the Red Jumpsuit Apparatus, Story of the Year, the Alkaline Trio, the Get Up Kids, All American Rejects, Glassjaw, etc., etc. That was kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s. I feel like, because I consider bands like Jimmy Eat World, and maybe even The Story So Far, Brand New, and Thursday, those are the bands that walked so more bands could run in the future and stuff like that. And so when you think about stuff like that, like the pop, like the stuff that you would see on MTV back in the day, TRL, VH1, all those kind of Fuse always had the best shit. And I wish I had that channel when I was a kid, because my cousin had it and I was like just sat glued to the TV watching it. Then we get into kind of another category is I like to call MySpace kind of bands. And that overlaps a lot with the metalcore, post-hardcore scene. There's a lot of overlap when you get into there. Those are bands like Census Fail, Hawthorne Heights, From First to Last, Silver Scene, The Used, Chiodos, Under Oath, like I've kind of mentioned before. It's Under Oath, Alexis on Fire, AFI, that is the stuff I think about there, where it's emo, but it's a little bit more on the hardcore side. We talked about like what Screamo music, it says in my notes, MySpace Screamo groups, which, like we said, Screamo is not a genre. So these are bands that really got their start from MySpace, people discovering them on MySpace. Those are a lot of people you would consider. I would consider even Never Shout Never in this category too, even though it was very acoustic ukulele poppy type of stuff. I would still, because there's a lot of emotionally driven music, it's emotionally driven as well, so I would consider that as well. And then a subcategory from that is scene music, what they would call is scene music, which is still, I would say, is a branch off of the emo tree. Those are bands like Asking Alexandria, Pierce the Veil, Sleeping with Sirens, Bring Me the Horizon, Attack, Get Scared, Black Veil Brides, Bless the Fall of Mice and Men. You could also really consider them metalcore groups at the same time as being considered emo, because I consider metalcore really to be, because there's metal, true metal, like Meshuggah and stuff like that, and was it Sean and not Sean. What's the band Jared Dines played with? Matt Heafy, the one Matt Heafy's in that band. I would consider them there. And these are definitely great emo music for people who like metal. A lot of people who are big metalheads these days. You talked about them, like what'd you listen to when you were younger? And then a lot of this stuff is like stepping stones into them enjoying metal. So if you like metal music, go back to what inspired a lot of people to enjoy it. The scene music, I would definitely consider the MySpace era of too, something that you would definitely love, because like from first to last, great. Silverstein, great. Under Oath, ooh, Chef's Kiss. Chiodos, if you haven't listened to Chiodos, they are fucking rad. Definitely bands I would suggest checking out. If you're kind of on the heavier side and wanting to dip your toe into the emo pool, these are great bands for you to start with and get into. And then last but not least, we have acoustic acts and we have pop punk. And so those are bands like My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, Paramore, Taking Back Sunday, Armor for Sleep, Weezer. I don't consider Weezer on what, they're not my notes. Get Up Kids, They Made a Cross, Dashboard Confessional, Secondhand Serenade, All Time Low, and Mayday Parade. Some of those kind of even go into more of like neon pop punk, neon emo, where it's kind of like bright colors and very upbeat kind of thing, but they're still pretty emo. A lot of these bands I wouldn't consider emo anymore. Fall Out Boy, I mean, their new album felt very emo, but I wouldn't consider it an emo album. Paramore doesn't make emo music. Weezer's never been emo. They've always been alternative to me. And then, this was the music that was the mainstream emo music back in the day. And so, like, that's the stuff. And a lot of these bands still make music that sounds like that, and especially the acoustic acts, they miss Never Shout Never, but his music's kind of shit now, and so I can see why they forgot about him, and he's kind of a dick. From what I've heard, he lives in Joplin, Missouri, so in Dashboard Confessionals, you get into like a lot of the more accessible, like Dashboard Confessional, like a lot of these bands are the kinds of bands that you can really, really, really like have playing on your speaker, and your parents, regardless of how Christian and uptight they are, you can listen to it, and they're not going to have like an issue with you listening to that kind of music. Like when you get to like stuff with screaming, like your parents get a little concerned for a minute, because it's kind of like, it's like, when you never heard that shit before, like you're like, what is this? Is this like demons or some shit? Like it makes sense. And then the subcategory from that, even more scene music that would probably fall more into pop punk than anything else. Coheed and Cambria, I wouldn't consider them. Forever the Sickest Kids, yeah. Metro Station, Cobra Starship, Q is what we aim for. They're a lot of like, they really fall under more pop emo categories, because like it's very synthesizers, very electronic, very much sounding. So that's where you get into bands kind of like that are still kind of a subgenre. When you start really looking at music genres and artists and that, you realize like really music genres are like a tree, and they all have branches and that branch off from it, and music's always evolving. And so that's why we consider emo music to be around so long, because we've been changing the formula of what we consider what we consider emo music. And so that's stuff like that. And even like, you even have like some bands that like aren't emo, but like you could consider them emo for a little bit. Like maybe it could be a little new metal, a little more punk than emo, a little bit too pop punk than emo. Wouldn't necessarily fall into the category necessarily, but when you make like an emo playlist, like their songs will fit in. Evanescence, Papa Roach, 3 Days Grace, maybe not 3 Days Grace, Flyleaf, Linkin Park, Avenged Sevenfold, Bullet for My Valentine, you could consider them emo, but they're not really emo, but there's some influence there. Pop punk acts like Sum 41, Blink-182, Green Day, Simple Plan. During the 2000s, a lot of people consider them emo. I would say Blink-182's one Untitled album is definitely like their emo album, where you consider the other ones pop punk, and I would consider Nine a little bit more poppy and stuff like that. Like you consider that era of pop punk, like they can fall into a emo category as well, even though I necessarily wouldn't full-fledged call them emo bands. They can still fit in with all the emo bands and like work on their their categories, and work on music they want to make, and still it fits into the playlist. But I think we kind of come up to today in regards to emo music. The genre kind of fizzled out in the 2010s, because you can only make the same album so many times, and so like if you have a long career like Blink-182, let's say Paramore, Fall Out Boy, like you can't just be making the same album all the time. A lot of bands do that, and I'm not going to call anyone out, but a lot of bands just make the same album over and over again. And so that's why it kind of fizzled out, and people really lost interest in the genre, and especially the bands they liked really changed their sound until really the late 2010s. That's when nostalgia starts coming in. And then Midwest Emo really branched off from math rock and really started gaining prominence. And it was very underground for a while. Hip hop artists and rap artists, Machine Gun Kelly, Lil Peep, Juice WRLD. Is Juice WRLD right? Or my notes say Juice, but maybe Juice WRLD. They kind of created their own subgenre of like emo rap, and you get to artists like Machine Gun Kelly or anything like Travis Barker is kind of producing today as a producer, because he's kind of making emo music and pop punk music, but it's also very pop music at the same time, and a lot of EDM elements, and especially hip hop beats added to it as well. And then you get more emo labels. But as we currently stand in 2024, emo music it is seeming like emo music is really making a revival. I think, all the people who loved it when they were too young to actually be able to go to the concerts, they're now old enough. We have money of our own, and we are able to spend that money to go to concerts and see our favorite bands from when we were tiny, tiny, small children. And really, when you're 10 years old and you like Blink-182, your parents aren't going to take you to a Blink-182 concert. There's a good chance it could be like a Plus 21 show or a lot of bigger bands that they do have all ages show because they're playing in big places and stuff like that. But also, like, your parents don't really want to, when they start saying shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits, fart, turd, and twat, like, that's when your parents take you out of the concert, And but I think emo music is really making a revival. I think nostalgia is really playing a part in it. People, when most music it goes through a cringe phase where, like, in the 2010s, we all looked back from, like, not that long ago, like less than 10 years ago, and, like, we all looked at our, like, hair that was swooping or long and stuff like that, and how we used to look. I'm like, oh, that was kind of cringy. And nowadays we know how to dress ourselves better. But we realize, like, that music, I still kind of like that music, because when, like, they say, like, when you're 13, the music you really like is what you're going to stick around with forever. And for a couple generations now, from the late 80s to the 2010s, like, that was everyone's favorite music. Kids nowadays who actually enjoy emo music, they tell me, they consider California by Blink-182, the album they did with Matt Skiba, that's also really good. Matt Skiba's rad, by the way. They consider that the best Blink album. I'm like, that's a good opinion. I don't know. We never really fully considered it Blink-182 with Matt Skiba, even though he is rad and is really cool, and I love Alkaline Trio as well. It's stuff like that. So, there's kind of a revival movement. When We Were Young is bringing back everything. Matt Cutshall, I believe is how you say his last name. He makes all these videos, like Emo's Not Dead videos, and he did like an Emo's Not Dead cruise where he got a bunch of emo bands to play every night and stuff like that, which is, like, really cool. And it's really cool to see a genre that I love being revived in such a good way. Now, it's probably being revived with millennials, and millennials range from, like, late 20s to in their 40s now. But overall, yeah, emo is making a revival nowadays. It's really exciting, and I am all for that. And, any emo band that wants to give me free concerts,
you bet I'm coming up in May.
I'll be at your show. So that is the history of emo music. What did you learn? What did I get wrong? Please leave a comment down below on what you thought of what I was talking about and where to go from here. So thank you for watching this clip. Watch it again or watch something else.